Today I'm going to present you a psychological movie from the year 2016, title Split. Spoiler alert, watch out and enjoy. Let's begin. Casey, an indifferent girl, sits blankly in a restaurant for her classmate's birthday. Claire, the birthday girl, tells her father after the party that she's feeling bad for Casey about getting to invite her out of mercy. Casey contacts her guardians on her phone to have them pick her up from the restaurant. Casey doesn't quite fit into any group since she is disconnected and quiet. She didn't have anybody else to go home with. Claire's father dismisses his daughter's action because Claire wants to go home without Casey. Her father waits to see if Casey can travel home with her guardians. Casey's guardian's vehicle unfortunately broke down, so Casey has decided to ride the bus, but Claire's father insists on taking her home instead. Claire and Casey, together with Marcia, Claire's best friend, go to the vehicle. While the two females talk their way to the backseat, Casey sits next to the driver's seat. A stranger approaches Claire's father, who unloads food and gifts from the car's compartment. The compartment is closed with a loud, and a different guy enters into the driver's seat. The girls are confused about this man because they thought that he enters the wrong vehicle. When the guy wears a face mask and sprays a chemical on Claire and Marcia, Casey freezes. Casey attempts to break free, but the man knocks her unconscious before she has a chance. In a chamber with a few rays of light, Casey takes back her conscious. Claire is cowardly, embracing Marcia. Before they can even have a serious conversation, when the door of the room opens, a man with an eyeglass and a sleek appearance comes, and his name is Dennis, and takes Marcia with him. After a little later, he returns with a tearful Marcia and furiously closes the door. Claire asks Marcia as to what happened. Dennis asked her to dance for him, but she peed on herself out of fear. As Claire reassures the other two that everything will be okay, a frightened Casey shakes her head because she remembers a childhood memory. In a cafe, a large guy named Uncle John was sharing a little Casey a hunting story. She was with her father that day, and she felt nothing could go wrong. In the meantime, in a psychotherapist facility, when news of the three teens' kidnapping spreads, an aging psychotherapist called Karen logs into her computer and notices that a patient named Barry has scheduled an appointment for therapy. Claire urges Marcia and Casey to fight back if their abductor tries to take one of them again. Casey thinks calmly and thoroughly, and she dismisses Claire's answer to the problem. Claire believes that they are running out of time, so the three must probably make a difficult move towards Dennis. Claire believes that Casey was scary and afraid again, given their situation, because they don't know what the circumstances are. Casey promises them that she would assist them once she has a proper knowledge of the solution. The second memory appears. Casey was in a tent in the midst of the woods. Her father was beside her, holding a pistol and instructing her on how to be a hunter. In Dr. Karen's office, a man in a hat and a loose coat walks in with a polite expression. One of the personalities names Barry, and he informs her that he received a fashion vision. Dr. Karen flicks through the pages of his vivid pictures. She attempts to find the character behind his lines by asking him leading questions. She lies about his work, but he stalls her by seeming to be deeply worried. And Barry begins to recognize some signs of a personality transformation when he placed Karen's belongings into the correct locations and carelessly left his artwork. He moves away from Dr. Karen's clinic. Meanwhile, the girls are still trying with the door's narrow area and capturing the information that a lady was living with their kidnapper. The lady was chatting with Dennis, whom the girls believe is the name of the kidnapper. The lady approaches the door and opens it. There was their kidnapper, who was dressed in a tight red turtleneck, a long skirt, and heels. The confused teenagers take a cautious step back. They were all surprised as to why he was dressed as a lady. Her name is Patricia. The lady reassures them that there is nothing to be concerned about because Dennis pays close attention to her. She assures will not slander or abuse them by Dennis, and she closes the door. Dr. Karen meets with a colleague doctor in town to examine the evidence for dissociative identity disorder. Karen's patients, according to her coworker, are not out of the ordinary. Karen, on the other hand, sees things differently. Marcia and Claire discover Dennis is having a whole discussion with his maid character in their windowless chamber. While they are talking, Dennis enters their restroom with a pail. He talks about how disgusting the restroom was and requests that they grab clothes and clean it. He tells the girls that as agreed with Patricia, he will never longer touch any of them. However, he says that they will be a sacred feast and left them wondering who would feed the three of them. Later that night, Claire and Marcia awaken Casey from his nap and point to the door, where the abductor and a yellow jacket sit contentedly in the open door. Dennis' 9-year-old fun and childlike personality was Hedwig. He repeatedly tells them that someone is on the moon. By this point, they realize their abductor wasn't thinking out his actions. The girls noticed how weak and gullible he is and asked him questions to discover clues. Casey urged him to approach near so she could talk clearly into his ear. Casey attempts to reverse engineer the issue with Hedwig, but the playful personality feels she was lying outright. Hedwig said that Dennis had been stalking Marcia and Claire for days, and the kidnapping had been planned for a long time. Casey claims that Patricia and Dennis are deceiving him and that they want to send Hedwig instead to the sacred feast. She almost convinces him that the females in the room are Hedwig's babysitters eager to defend him from Patricia and Dennis, but he has to tell them the way out right away so they can save him. Hedwig returns to the door and closes it while Casey peers through the cracks. She sees Hedwig struggling to open the second door. Hedwig enters the room and insists that the girls allow him in. Claire removes a section of the steel grid from the ceiling, as the two jiggle the door against the enraged Hedwig. Hedwig transforms into Dennis and pushes open the door with all his might. Claire climbs up and navigates her way over the ceiling, where she is pursued by Dennis, who is yelling. She quietly hides in a locker, but Dennis discovers her and orders her to come out. He asks her to take off her sweaters and brings her to a different room, which he carefully locks, and he and repairing the ceiling in the room of Marcia and Casey, informing them that Claire will be imprisoned away from them. He also orders them to remove their skirts and sweaters. In the meantime, Dr. Karen is participating in a video conference with his colleagues psychotherapists from Paris. She provides clinical data from her patients with dissociative identity disorder in terms of unlocking all of the identities that the brain may have. After that, Barry pays for a visit after the conference, but she immediately notices that he was in a different character. Dr. Karen exploits him, and she wanted to talk to his other personas, but Dennis is so strong that she thinks it was Dennis wearing other outfits. Dennis becoming irritated as Karen is questioning him following the session. Dr. Karen examines the CCTV and admits that Dennis or Patricia were acting while taking over Barry's personality. Marcia realizes that they must find a way out while they are still alive. Casey recalls a hunting trip with her father and Uncle John as she is speaking. Meanwhile, Patricia grooms and feeds Casey and Marcia and invites them out for a decent meal in the kitchen because they were lovely girls, unlike the imprisoned Claire. Marcia makes a powerful attempt to hit Patricia with a stool as Patricia is preparing the food. Patricia takes over and orders Casey to lock herself in the room. And when he finds the terrified Marcia, he sends her to a different room as a punishment. Dennis warns Casey that the beast is going to feast on her. On another hunting trip while Casey was looking into the woods while her father slept, her Uncle John is holding a pistol in front of the helpless girl. Casey awakens with her head weakening and someone holding her from behind. Hedwig says that Barry and Patricia choose who stays in the spotlight, but Hedwig is an exception. He also claims that only Patricia and Dennis believe in the beast's existence, despite their uncertainty about who the beast is and what it actually was. Casey wants to know to Hedwig whether he has ever seen the beast. Casey accepts when Hedwig diverts her attention by asking permission to kiss her. After admitting that he is a good kisser, she asks Hedwig if they may sneak into his room and dance with him. But Hedwig left with no answer because Barry have an appointment for Karen this day. During the session, Dr. Karen speaks to Dennis instead of Barry, implying that his ideas are ridiculous, as Barry has described in prior sessions. She flatters Dennis in order to gain their trust. She reveals that if Dennis does not open up, all of the other personalities would ultimately take over the light all at once, revealing that he and Patricia were ridiculed by all 22 distinct personas. He was purposefully altering his behavior to protect Kevin, who was weak. She dares him to explain the beast narrative, which she feels is just Dennis and Patricia's imagination. Hedwig brings Casey to his room after the session, where she enters cautiously. Hedwig frantically dances to the stereo's loud booming sounds. Hedwig hands Casey a walkie-talkie from Dennis. Casey calls in and describes the situation to the man answering the receiver of walkie-talkie, but Hedwig snatches the walkie-talkie back. He takes Casey to her room. Dennis appears in his regular appearance, complete with eyeglasses. He says that the beast will be pleased. When the night is done, Casey recalls Uncle John lying behind a large boulder and calls the child Casey, who is wandering through the wilderness without his father. He was undressed and requested Casey to wear one of her dresses, teaching her that they were playing animal roles with no clothing on. And when he was through, Casey waited just above his shelter, clutching a gun. Casey loaded it and pointed it towards Uncle John, who immediately grabbed it away from her for her own protection. Dr. Karen pays Dennis a visit in the middle of the night. Dennis leads her to Barry's room and begins telling her the familiar story of Kevin's traumatic childhood. When Dr. Karen discusses the beast feasting on immoral young ladies, Dennis is hesitant to elaborate because he is unprepared and terrified. Dr. Karen pauses the talk to prepare for a proper session, then walks to the restroom and scans the rooms across the hall. She discovers Claire in one of his chambers, but he takes her away with a poisonous spray. While Casey works to unlock the door from the inside, the two others find time to escape. Dennis visits a mall to purchase a bunch of flowers. Casey enters a room with a computer and discovers all of the films of the 23 unique personas. Dennis enters an abandoned train car and transforms into the 24th persona. He becomes larger and heavier, and he moves more wildly than any of the other 23 characters. He returns as the feared beast. Karen awakens and takes notes at one of his tables. With a hazy vision, she grabs a bread knife and stabs him from behind. However, the blade fractures into pieces. The beast suffocates the frightened doctor. After studying the recordings, Casey determines the position of the keys and silently searches the corridors for Marcia and Claire. Marcia has already been torn with blood in one of the rooms. Claire was alive in one of the rooms, but the beast drags her and swallows her organs. Casey discovers a message from Karen but becomes frozen in terror when the beast begins climbing the wall. His name is written in distorted characters. Kevin Wendell Crumb. She starts chanting his name over and over. Kevin traumatized to please his mother under the bed, becoming louder as she sees him deteriorate. Kevin, the original personality, takes control of the body as he recalls his violent mother calling them out, with Kevin unaware of what the other personas did. Kevin urges Casey to shoot him with a gun from the cabinet, but she suddenly stops her. Casey sees Kevin's transformation into all of the significant personas at the same time. While Hedwig is in the light, Casey looks for the pistol case, unaware that he is about to turn into the beast. So she rushes through the rooms, probing for gunshots. Before Casey could load all of the shells, the beast had already transformed. Casey quickly runs into the dark and the beast seizes her and tears her sweater to pieces. She retrieves the pistol from the floor and rises back up to lock the cage with Wounded before dragging herself to the farthest south corner. Casey recalls that Uncle John approached from behind little Casey, who was sitting peacefully. Her father's funeral was taking place. Uncle John assured her that he would look after her. She takes aim at the beast, which is advancing quickly down the dark lane. Just like she'd been trained to hunt, he quickly learns that the beast is unstoppable as she fires on the beast with only 2 rounds in her pistol bag. The beast works the bars with his bare hands, but Casey's purity allows him to see the wounds on her body. The beast takes a step back and leaves. Later, a guy enters the basement and finds Casey's figure in the cage. He aids her away from the zoo's main enclosure, and a medical officer goes to Casey. The policemen search Kevin's position in the basement. Kevin enters an abandoned chamber, where all of the major characters take up the light at the same time. They're examining Kevin's body for signs of the beast's durability. A TV announcer announces the terrible news of Kevin's 3 murders in the zoo's basement. The world of skeptics is now aware that dissociative identity disorder does exist. Thank you for watching. See you next video.